Okay, moms, we're going to go ahead and start our Friday morning discussion. It is so good to be with my friends. I love it. And we have a mom who hasn't been here for a while, so that's fun to see you back, Mary. Welcome. I know you come when you can, and we sure appreciate it. That's so fun. And she's got a nice blue sky behind her. That's awesome. Out
I'm going
walking.
to be trying to come my Friday mornings free. So I'm excited to be here and I'm looking forward to being here more often.
Oh, good. That's awesome. I'm excited, really excited. I'm glad. Okay, and then we've got a new mom on here too. And anytime that you want, if you want to introduce yourself, you're welcome to. And if you want to hang back, you're welcome to do that too. So we want to make sure everybody is comfortable here. So no forcing anybody. But we love seeing your faces too. So if that's an option for you, please come on camera. And when you can't, you know that we understand. We just love to see you. It makes it more personal when we can see each other and connect that way. So it's February. So February is the month where in the Mother's University, we talk about storytelling. So we will be talking about that a bit today. So for any of you that might have had some experiences in the past, or you're anticipating things for this month, or whatever it is you've got going, I would love to hear what you wanted to share about storytelling. So think about that for a sec. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Amber, for reminding me. So our friend Amber that is on here today, so sweet, contacted me, and she is suffering from these colds and flus that we've been having going around, and has a cough that she said is just not super fun to listen to. So she's going to join us when that's all better. So we totally understand. Thanks, Amber, for reminding me. There's so many new moms. I love it. But but I have a hard time remembering sometime. Okay, hold on. Do we have a little, what are we showing me? Can you put it closer to the camera, buddy? Is it a card? What is it? Oh, very cool. Oh, super cool. A Pokemon card. Oh, very nice. Thanks for sharing, buddy. Did you get to go on the We Heart Share the other day? Oh, me neither. I was an hour before I was ready to go, and then something happened and I couldn't jump on. I was so sad to miss that. For any of you moms who don't know, or for those who are watching the recording later, there is a monthly event hosted by Rachel Stevens called We Heart Share. So it's WEH, and the H is the beginning of heart share. And it is so much fun. Families can come together and share things online during that, I think half hour to an hour. And I just love that. I love that idea. And anybody that wants to know more about that can let me know. I will type the name of it in here. But Rachel loves to get new families on there, and she's so good, so great hosting this and facilitating these fun activities, getting together. Oh, more cards. I love it. Oh, and I'm gonna hang on one second. Okay, sorry. I was updating with my husband about our raccoon situation. We have raccoons in the back, and while they're super fun to watch and see, they're not super fun when you have a garden and fruit trees and nut trees and stuff. So we are taking measures to try to move them. So maybe we'll send them to the Fillmores. No, we have a mama and 3 youngsters. So anyway, so I guess it could be a little nature study, but it's going to be a little, hopefully they end up liking the tuna we put out for them, and we can move them to the park. So that's the plan. If anybody has tips on trapping raccoons, you can send them my way. In the meantime, anybody have any thoughts they want to share about storytelling? We're just going to see what, if you've had some examples, some things in your family, or if you want to tell a story about something that has happened with you and your family. So think about that. If any of you want to, you can just jump on. If you don't feel comfortable jumping on, you can raise your hand, but you absolutely do not have to do that. Also, you can share in the chats if that's more comfortable for you as well. I'm going to start off just saying that I've gone to the Well-Educated Heart app and gone into that section of the Mother's University on Storytelling. I love that so much. So just this morning, I was sending some of those lovely videos about storytelling to my family. I sent to my dad and my brother and my sisters, and I love it. I'm curious to know if you have any favorites. If you don't recall, one of the ones that I sent to them was the little girl telling the story of Jonah. Have you guys watched that one? Which is a very, very animated telling of the story of Jonah and the whale. If you have children, they would probably love to watch her tell this story. It's really, really cute. And the other is the one about, I think it's entitled Shakespeare Saved My Life. Have you watched that one? It's a TED Talk. And it's a group of, it's about a group of inmates at a high security prison. They're all in solitary confinement. And they got special permission to have this woman come. She was studying the effects of Shakespeare, and she came and sat in a hallway where these inmates were brought in to these special cells, and they were, again, all individual cells. They could not see each other. They only had a tiny little slot. They call it a cuff slot that they could peer through and see the woman that was sitting in the hallway, or maybe see across the hall. I don't know. But anyway, she sat out there, and she had given them excerpts from Shakespeare to read, and then she would read things to them, and they would discuss their thoughts and their feelings about what they were reading. It is pretty incredible, the things that happened as a result of that experience. And so I encourage you to go to these resources. It is incredible what we have available to us just through the app or the website. If you just go into that Well-Educated Heart app, so you go there and click on Mother's University, and you get this page here with a couple of lovely quotes on it, reminding you about the way to start a Mothers of Influence group, which I highly encourage. And then reminding about the introductory course, which is good for us to go through over and over again. And then it starts through with the months and the different months. And since we're in February, the topic for February, as I said when we started, is storytelling. So it tells you a little bit about that. It says the objective is to inspire you to include more storytelling in your home. Now, that is something, even if you're doing it a lot, couldn't you include more? That's a challenge that we all could take, right? Whether we're at 0 or whether we're doing that already, we could definitely jump in there and try to do that a little bit more. Okay. So then there are a couple of quotes in there. One of them, I would rather be a teller of stories to children than be the queen's favorite or serve in the king's court. I think that's an older quote, but I like that one. And another, let me beg of you, mothers, do not think you cannot tell stories. Try, keep on trying, and ease in telling is bound to come. So that means you're going to get better as you work on it. You keep trying, you're going to get better and better. There's a little audio to listen to about how to tell stories to children. So if you're unsure about that, you can listen to the audio about that. And then here are the things I was speaking to you about. So here's the one about Shakespeare and how Shakespeare saved my life. And it is so, so good. Here's this one about libraries of hope. Do you remember the story about the bees? The man that was telling his friend and was so distraught because the honey in his hives was so bitter. It just tasted awful. And the friend suggested that they get up early the next morning and follow the hive, find out where those bees were going, to get the food to make their honey. So that's what they did. They got up early the next morning and they followed the bees. Isn't that an interesting idea? I've never ever thought of following bees, but now I kind of want to. I wonder if I could follow bees that I find in my yard and see where it is that they're going. I think that that would be really fun. But in any case, these two friends followed the beehive and they found them. Do you know where they found them? They found them at the back of an old closed up bottling company, and there were old barrels of syrup in the back. And those barrels of syrup, they were this sweet, sweet, sticky syrup, but they were rotting. And that rotten syrup is what the bees were trying to eat. Well, I'm sorry, it's what they were eating, and it's what they were taking back to the hives and making honey out of. So no wonder the honey tasted nasty. It was made with this bitter, rotting syrup. So the friend told the man with the bees, if you change what the bees are feeding on, it will change the taste of the honey. Now, I invite you moms, if you have heard that or if you haven't heard that, to tell us, what do you think is a lesson we could learn from that? I posted that on my Instagram post and sent it to Facebook because I wanted to remember it again. I've read it before, I've heard the story before, but I'd forgotten it. I love that thought. If you change what your bees are feeding on, it will change the taste of your honey. So any thoughts on that? What are the lessons we can learn from that? Applying them to ourselves or to our children? Anybody want to share?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Mary.
Just remind kind of an experience I had a couple of weeks ago. We, I haven't been like super duper selective about what I read to my kids because I feel like there's a lot of value in a lot of different things. And so as long as we discuss it, but we went to the library and my youngest son, who is 2 and has no idea what anything is, he got a book off one of the shelves, and I did not look at it before we brought it home. I just was like, okay, yeah, sure, like he can pick a book too. So we brought it home, and my oldest, who's 5, and I were reading it, and it was a really mean book. It was a book about a little boy whose older brother was really mean to him and just told him mean things. And then he was just thinking about how when he gets older, he will basically he will fix his brother by all of these awful things that he's going to do to him. And I like, it was so sad. And I'm reading this book and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so awful. And so I sat down with my, as we were reading, I was like, Tommy, what do you think about how these brothers are treating each other? He goes, it is not a very nice book. And I said, you're right. He goes, I think we should return it to the library. And I said, I think you're right. And it just, like, it made me think about, like, if that's what our kids are growing up with, if our kids are growing up with books and stories about people being mean to each other and people retaliating to meanness with meanness, which is a lot of what we see going on in our world today, is people just trying to like get back at people who are mean to them, then we're going to produce people who are mean to people if back. Like, whereas if we really like strive to help our kids notice those things and help them notice the beautiful, but also feed them the stories about people forgiving people who are mean to them, and people, feeding them the stories of courage and hope and forgiveness and mercy and love, then that's what they will grow up to become. But if we don't talk to our kids about them, if we don't feed them these stories, then all they will know are the stories that they see every day at school. All they will know are the stories that they see or that they hear their friends tell, and a lot of those stories are not merciful and they are not forgiving, and that will shape who they grow up to be. But if we feed them the good stories, then they'll be able to recognize the difference. They'll be able to say, Mom, this is kind of a mean book. this kind of a mean story. I don't want to read this. So
Thank you. Personal application, personal experience. I love it. That's awesome. Lindsey Watkins.
Hi, sorry I was late. I was listening to a podcast this morning by Julie, is her last name Bogart, the Brave Learner. I'll have to go back and double check that name. Anyway, and she was saying when you're reading stories to kids, to get them critically thinking from other points of view, ask them like, so if you're reading, instead of the main character saying, what do you think the story's like for this character? And letting them see it from all different points of view, not just the main story that they present to you. You know what I mean? And I think feeding them those points of view as well gives them a more well-rounded, I guess you're on the B flavor, you know what I mean? As opposed to just always believing the one story that's right in front of you the whole time. Because you look at history, I mean, this is Black History Month, okay? And again, how many times do we really look at every point of view based on culture, the way that we live now? You know what I mean? It's just giving them a more well-rounded view of each individual story.
Yeah, I like that. I love that. I mean, I kind of do that. I would do narrations with art and imagine what was going on with all the different characters that were in the picture. So yes, why not in stories? I think that's a wonderful idea. And yeah, Melanie, go ahead.
So my oldest son has been fascinated with bees ever since he was like 2. When he was 2, we were watching videos on YouTube about how they would smoke the bees and get the honey and everything. And he wants to have bees. So for a year and a half or so, maybe 2 years, we were going every month to a beekeepers guild, and they'd have experts from around the country come and do lectures for the second hour. And the first hour, we'd learn all this newbie bee stuff. So there was one time that we had a honey taste where we got to try. They taught us skills of how to taste it on different, like you swirl it, you smell it, you put it on the tip of your tongue, and then you put it like all over, and like you savor it really slowly and gradually. So first of all, I think there's something to that. But also there were several different kinds of honeys that we tasted based on what the bees were around. So and we kind of figured out which ones we liked the best. Some were more chunky, some were more smooth, some had more fruity flavor. And I think my son's favorite was the wild orange blossom, and my favorite was the star anise. And I think the typical that is sold in grocery stores, I think, is clover. It was just really interesting to become more aware of those variations. And we've bought, for our food storage, we've bought buckets of honey. So we got one of the wild orange blossom, and I think we might have gotten a star anise that we haven't dipped into yet. Oh, another one was a wildflower. Anyways, it's just been interesting to notice like what I would be more willing to use some honeys with than others. Like the orange blossom goes well with fruity things like jam, but I prefer other honeys for other things. Anyways, so I think it's interesting to note for our conversation that, you know, there's lots of different beautiful, good honeys. It's not just like if you go to the garbage, rotten source, then it's going to turn out bad. But there's a variety of good, sweet honeys that we all have our own tastes and what we prefer. And we might prefer different things for different situations. And so that just kind of reminds me of how even just all of us here, we're going to good sources. We're trying to all go to good sources, but it's going to look different in every family. And we're like tailoring it to our own kids. And what interests us this month is going to be different next month. And that doesn't mean it's bad or that we're missing out necessarily. It's just a different sweetness that we're enjoying in our lives.
Oh, Melanie, I love that. I love that example, reading with your son. That's so much fun to hear about his experiences and yours, and learning how to really taste and savor that. And the reminder that it's going to look different for each one of us. I love that.
So what I think it was Lindsey Watkins was saying, we all have our different perspectives, right? If each family's honey tastes different, That's the perspective we're coming from, and we shouldn't be judging the other, fruity honey as bad because it's different or whatever.
Right. Oh, that's so good. I love that. I love that. Thanks, both of you, Lindsay and Melanie. Okay. Other comments, other input? And remember, I put it in the comments, but remember, we're talking about you. We're talking about your hearts and what you read and what you put into your life as well, not just for your children. Although I love looking at and reading about the difference it makes in children's lives to bring them more quality. It really does make a difference. The kinds of stories that we tell them, the entertainment that we put in front of them, all of that makes a difference. But it makes a difference for us too. If our hearts are fed, if we're nurturing our own hearts, it changes how we are. It changes how we interact with our families, with our friends. It really makes a difference. I've heard from many of you about the differences that you're noticing in your own hearts and your own lives with yourself. And then as it branches out to others around you, because you're spending some time nurturing your heart. I think that is just incredible. That's been one of my biggest surprises, I guess, in doing that this change would be so great. I knew there would be a change, but I didn't realize how huge that change would be. So see, Lindsay and Laura are driving outside of town a ways because they're celebrating Max's birthday together, which I think is so much fun. So happy birthday, Max. I don't know what day the birthday is. Is it today, buddy? It's today. So yours is the day before Michael's. I need to remember that. Tomorrow is Michael's birthday. But happy birthday, buddy. Have a good time out there, you guys. That's so fun. But they're going to have spotty reception. So we'll probably hear from them just maybe here and there, maybe not at all. But that's all right. Maybe when you get there. So any other comments? Any others want to share about this idea? Anything they're looking at regarding storytelling? We have such great resources, just as a reminder while you're thinking. This is online for you, right? You can access this for free. You don't have to pay for it, but you have the Mother's University and you can read these excerpts about storytelling that Marlene has compiled for us. And they're so good. I love them. I love from the very, very beginning of the book, the first little entry, tell me a story. And then just that. I don't know if you read that, but that's the one we talked about last year when we got to February. We talked about that storyteller and how he left the children wanting, every night, waiting for that, just so excited for the rest of the story. So I love that. I love storytelling. I have so many books that are lists of books. And then my library is full of books. I love stories and I love telling stories. This is actually a really good one. And for those of you who are into reading books about books, this is a good one. Reading Magic, and it's by Mem Fox. She's a very popular children's author. And it's lovely. The subtitle is Why Reading Aloud to Our Children Will Change Their Lives Forever. And then I know Lindsay has a great resource that she's followed forever, and it's the Read Aloud Revival. Is that right, Lindsay? Bunting? Yeah. Okay. So Read Aloud Revival is another one. And that one is so, so good. Anybody else have things that resources? Oh, go ahead, Lindsay.
It's a podcast, so it's really easy to take an episode here and there and just start from the beginning, and it's so good. It really gives you the inspiration you need to read aloud.
Great. I love that. We need cheerleaders in our lives, right? To remind us we can do it. We can do it. Okay, I marked this page because I thought this was cute. It's just a silly little cartoon, but it's just a mother chick reading a story to her egg. And okay. So on that note, my daughter Kate and her husband Jamin are reading stories and talking to their little baby that's growing. So my Kate is pregnant, expecting a baby, and I'm so excited. I just barely got permission to tell, and she is 6 months along. So she is due the end of May and having a little boy, and I couldn't be more happy. So we have little Emma, who is turning 1 this month, and now a little boy coming to the family. So I am one happy grandma. So practicing all my storytelling skills, right? Here's another recommendation just from my own library to yours. Beatrix Potter. Some people will say, no, 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 my kids aren't ready for that. You guys probably know already. You already saw some heads nodding. These stories are so wonderful. They're wonderful because they're rich in language. They're such great vocabulary. And if you can recall when you were little, it's so much fun to read big words, to know big words and use big words. And so there's a lot of those in these books, and it's really fun to read them. And don't be afraid of it. Just read the stories to your little ones. I did that when my kids were tiny. I would just sit outside the door, the bedroom door. I mean, when they were little and I only had a couple, I would sit in the bedroom. But then as they got older, I would sit in the hallway. In fact, Linnell was just talking about that the other day. And sitting in the hallway reading to her kids. And they can hear you. They're in their rooms, just quietly and listening to you. And I love it. Yes, Lindsay, Winnie the Pooh. I love the Winnie the Pooh stories. Winnie the Pooh. I just love that. I love the imagery of Christopher Robin as he's, going up or down the stairs, and Pooh's head is thumping on the steps as he's moving. I just love it. I love it all. This one is so old, so well used that at the very end, when it's supposed to make a sound, it doesn't anymore because we've just really wore this one out. But I love to read stories. I love to listen to stories. Do you moms listen to stories? I listen to Marlene tell stories all the time. I remember Lindsey Bunting talking about that. Your mom does? Yes? Okay, good. I'm glad. I think that's awesome. Your mom is a good mom. That's one of the ways you can tell is because she listens to stories. I love it. So if your moms aren't listening to stories, if any of you kids can hear me, you need to remind your moms, you need to listen to stories too. It's not just for us kids, it's for you moms. So encourage your moms to listen to stories. That's right. So I love to put on that Belmont and listen to Marlene tell stories. I love it. And I sometimes go to sleep listening to her stories. So I remember in school, that was my very, very favorite thing was reading time. When my teacher brought out the stool, and I don't know why it was, but our teachers always brought out the stool and sat on the stool in the front of the classroom and would do a read aloud of a chapter book. And I could hardly wait until the next day to hear the next chapter in the book. I loved that so much. Okay, let's see what you're saying over here. I love listening to my family member stories. Oh, I love that, Seven. That is great. I loved the entry that was in Well-Educated Heart, the group page this week about the mom who has compiled some family stories into a book form. If you missed that, look for it. She shared the book and that was a collection of these stories. And she also said that later this month, she'll do a Zoom walking us through the process if we're interested in doing that for ourselves. So you just private message her and she'll include you in her group. And I'll see if I can find that while we're in between. But and then Lindsey Watkins, I just read for myself, The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. I plan to read it to my kids. It is so good. Okay, wonderful. So 8 years and up. Yeah, it's fun to share book references. It's fun to do that. So I'm not going to tell you her name on here because she might not want that. So I'll type it in the chat so you can look for her on Facebook and look for her comment and her book and let her know if you're interested in learning, being part of that Zoom to learn how to create a book of your family members' stories. I think that's so sweet. So I just love storytelling. Here's another. Oh, The Boy That Spoke to the Earth is one of my new favorites of my kiddos. Oh, thanks for sharing that. That sounds like something I would like to. I'm going to share this one. I've shared it with a few of you on Marco Polo. And I've decided I need to take a screenshot whenever I have somebody recommend a book and I go get it, because I can't ever remember where I heard about it to go back and thank the person and tell them, oh, I'm so happy to have this. So this book is called A Little Aloud. The subtitle is an anthology of prose and poetry for reading aloud to someone you care for. You don't have to have this book. You can do it with what you have. You can do it with all of the wonderful, well-educated heart resources. But I love the concept. So it started, there's a group over in the UK called the Reader Organization, and they lead these, they have a project called the Get Into Reading Project, and they run hundreds of weekly read aloud groups for people who may not otherwise have access to books, including people who live in deprived areas, the mentally or chronically ill, older people living in care homes, prisoners, recovering addicts, and excluded children. So somebody goes and reads to a group of people in any of those situations, or some of the ones that I've read and heard about online were just family members. Maybe a mom. One of them was sweet. It was a mother reading to her daughter who had just had a baby and was just tired, overwhelmed, all the stuff. And the mom had come over to help her daughter. And one of the things she did was sat and read to her, which I thought was so sweet. But the book, what the concept is, you find a story or a little excerpt from a story, and you read a little bit from a story, and then you read a poem that is somehow connected, and it can be very loosely connected. And then you have a little discussion afterwards. And the book even includes the discussions a little bit from the discussions afterwards. And so I love the idea. I love the idea so much. So like, for example, this one has, the story is, hold on, let me find it. The story is The Doll's House. So it's an excerpt from that story. Some of you might be familiar with that. And then there is a poem called The Little Dancers. And I'll just share the poem real quickly so you kind of have an idea. Lonely, save for a few faint stars, the sky dreams. And lonely below, the little street into its gloom retires, secluded and shy. Scarcely the dumb roar enters this soft retreat, and all is dark, save where come flooding rays from a tavern window. There, to the brisk measure of an organ that down in an alley merrily plays, two children, all alone and no one by, holding their tattered frocks through an airy maze of motion, lightly threaded with nimble feet, dance sedately. Face to face they gaze, their eyes shining, grave with a perfect pleasure. So then the little reading notes say, a woman in a residential home for the elderly was delighted to remember that she had once owned a doll's house. That's from the story that goes with this, with a beautiful set of sweet jars with real sweets in them. Another remembered that her cat used to like to sleep squashed into the doll's house. The group talked about how children can often be cruel to one another and thought about why it was that some children were picked on more than others. James thought that the Kelvies were picked on because their mother was a washerwoman. He blamed parents for teaching their children to be snobs. The children in the poem reminded Molly of the Kelvies at the end of the story. Face to face they gaze, their eyes shining, grave with a perfect pleasure. Then the group talked of pubs and barrel organs, of the monkeys that sometimes belonged to organ grinders, and how children never used to be allowed in public houses. Everyone remarked on the special atmosphere of the poem and the children in a world of their own. That right there, just reading through some of these little notes at the end of the stories and poems, gave me this lovely little picture of a Mothers of Influence group. You just sit with a friend, you share a little story or a poem, and you share your thoughts. But anyway, I loved that. I love that. Lindsey Bunting, do you have something you want to share? Because I can tell you probably are wanting to go run and play with your kiddo. So
I don't really have anything in particular to share. I just wasn't ready to stop listening yet. Always so nice to hear, I don't know, just all of it. It gives me motivation. So, yeah.
I love when I know that you moms read and that you value that. And I know, Lindsey, that you do. I know that your kids get to see you doing that. And that can you just talk for a moment about the change that happened when you started doing things for yourself and how that changed what you saw in your kids?
Yeah, it's so hard to see it. And I was listening to Brooke Snow this morning, and it's kind of like what she was talking about, the growth. Like, for so long, you can't really see I don't know. I guess you do, but it happens so slowly that it's hard to see like the immediate, like, oh wow, there's a big difference in our home. But I think like I can look back now and just see, like Mary was talking about kids, recognizing good books and bad books. Like my kids have always been able to do that because like she did from the very beginning, you talk about it. And yeah, you just like know what things are good and what things are bad. They enjoy stories and books. We've always gone to bed reading books, and it's just become like our family culture that we just read stories, and books are a big part of that. And like right now we have a whole bag of books we brought out here, like whether we read them or not, we never leave the house without like a whole bag of books. And some of them are for me and some of them they grabbed, and they're all different types about different things. And I grabbed my Restoring the Art of Storytelling book because I thought I feel like that book is good for everybody, because even if you don't have time to just sit and read the part for you, there's a whole bunch of stories at the end that you could just read to your kids, and then those are the ones you're supposed to try to memorize and learn them by heart. And like I have weird lighting right here. I don't know. I'm sure you could think of things I should say more than I can think of things I should say.
Well, I see the difference. I see it huge, but you're right, because I'm not living with them every day, and I'm not seeing that. But I see the change that's happened with your kids and with Laura's, because I'm right there and I'm around them. But it's just that whole idea of this organized mother love. What does it say?
Is
I know
I
it's
don't know.
miracles, but I can't remember how you say it. But it's
Mother love does something, but organized
Magic.
mother love, yeah, makes miracles. Something.
Yeah, mother love. Yeah, I guess mother love makes magic. Organized mother love makes miracles. I don't know if it's makes, but anyway,
Wow.
I do notice that difference. I mean, it is magic, just all on its own. Just the mother with her children and the things that you can do in your home. But then this organized mother love. Do you have it, Linnell? Linnell was probably going for it. But no. But organized mother love is just really, truly, I'm seeing the miracles left and right in your lives. And it is so exciting and so beautiful. I love it.
Yep. I love that our teenage girls now get together and they plan tea parties, and they're excited to like do these things because they see us doing it, and that's actually what they want to do.
Yeah.
Even though they wouldn't tell us that they're doing it because we do it.
Oh yeah, never. Right. That's
totally
not gonna
their
come up.
thing. It's not
and
our
if you
idea at all.
right, and you better not say anything about it, right? Or otherwise it'll be canceled all of a
I
sudden.
know.
For
I
no
had to make
reason.
sure they were out of earshot before I said that.
Right. No, I know. I was a little worried signing it this week. I signed it to Laura's daughter, Madeline, and she said, "Oh, could that kind of be like the tea parties we were doing before?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, absolutely."
Yeah.
So I love that. I love that they want to do that. So I've got a couple girls that I'm meeting with. We're supposed to actually go down to a museum, to an art museum. I figured that might be the best way to start, to do an intro to this whole thing, was to take them with me and go visit an art museum and then start our discussions from there. So Linnell.
I've had storytelling rescue me at least 4 or 5 times this past week in parenting. So I want to share how I've been able to use it. And first of all, I remember last year's discussion from our group about storytelling, and something that I learned about a key difference of reading books and watching movies versus storytelling is that storytelling comes from the heart. It's very organic. It's very natural. It's your own words. It's not something you read, and it's not something you see. And I was never good at that. ¿Qué pasa, Benji?
¿Puedo yo usar esos papeles que están en mi escritorio?
Pregúntame después. ¿Puedes cerrar la puerta? Cuando acabe. ¿Ok?
¿Cuándo acabas?
Gracias.
¿A las 1 acabas?
Sí.
Ok, a las 1 te
I love
pregunto.
when she's talking to her
Gracias.
kids. It's just so sweet. She's so respectful, and it's in Spanish, so it's interesting.
Dice
Cierra la
las
puerta, por
12.
favor. Gracias. Estoy con...
12:40.
Gracias. Gracias. Sorry.
No, that's important.
Where was I? storytelling. What's the
Very
difference? The
organic.
difference is from your heart and it's organic. And I realized that I don't have that skill and it doesn't come natural and I never used it. And so knowing that this month we're practicing storytelling, it's been on my mind. It's been on my mind a lot. And so I have used it. So let me tell you a few experiences of what has happened. One example is that my son didn't want to brush his teeth and my husband was trying to get him to come brush his teeth and he was stubborn and he was working on a project. So it was very inconvenient for him. My husband tried a few times and he couldn't get my son to come. So he said, no, could you help me out here? So I thought of storytelling and I knew that if I just ripped him away from his project, he would be upset and he would cry and then it would be harder to brush his teeth. So I whispered a story in his ear and it was a simple story. They were learning about tsunamis. And so I made up a story about an eagle who came and picked up a boy and saved him from a tsunami. It was random. It was out of nowhere with a little bit of key elements of what they had been learning about, but he was captivated and he was distracted and he was willing to do what I said. And so that same pattern I've used multiple times. Another time was when my son was very distraught. He didn't want to go to bed and he was crying in his bed. Who can fall asleep crying, right? And so I knew I needed to calm him. And so this works really well to calm them quickly or to get them to do what you want them to do. It's just a really sweet and natural way to connect. I think that's the key. And so my son was screaming in his bed, trying to fall asleep, and I just whispered a story to him. It took a lot of patience out of me because he kept screaming, and maybe it took 1 minute, which isn't very long when you compare, like he could have been screaming there for 10 minutes. And so I was just whispering in his ear this story, and I made up, I don't even remember what actually, I think I retold the tsunami story. And with the one son about the toothbrush, he likes the color blue. So it was like a blue turtle and dolphin, so I just added in different elements that would relate to them. So I am recognizing the power of connecting to our children when we speak to them, and also the blessing it can be for us in our parenting when we use it at these crucial times.
I love that. And I love that those, again, were personal experiences that you had just this week with storytelling. I think that is wonderful. So good. Lindsay?
I love that. And it reminded me of something that Sarah McKenzie, who does Read Aloud Bible, she shared a long time ago. And I've used this so many times over the years. She said, if there's just like a meltdown in your house, like you said, like things just aren't going, they're just not going the way you wanted them to. Somebody's just upset, or you've got a screaming toddler or whatever. Just grab a book, like any good book off the shelf, a picture book, and just sit down and start reading it. Don't tell everybody, hey, let's just read a story, guys. Come on in here, let's read a story. Like, don't say anything. Don't introduce it in any way. Just start reading. And maybe you have like your youngest will come over and like, look, and pretty soon it never fails. I have never had this fail. All of my kids up to the teenager are standing around or sitting or like lurking in the other room, like staring, and I can tell that's all they're doing is listening. Everyone will come in and listen. And it just kind of refocuses. Everyone just kind of is like calms. It's magical.
That's one of the examples I wanted you to share, but I wanted it to be, because you thought of it and wanted to, but every time you share that, you light up and I can see that in you. And I love that. I just love that. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you didn't. I light up because I think, I promise you, like, it works. But I've always been skeptical too. And I sometimes am like, okay, I'm about to cry. Why would I want to read a book? And sometimes you just think that'll not work. That's not going to work for this is crazy. And it's just funny how fast it'll change the mood. And I'm not promising it will work in everybody's home in every situation, but it,
But I think most of the time it actually will.
I think, well, I've never had it fail, and I've had pretty like upset kids in my house, and I'm like, I'll just do it.
And sometimes it just requires you believing in it, even just a little bit.
Yeah.
And it will happen. I love it. And I don't know if you noticed, but when I was telling this story about what was it? Oh, the bees, right? I started telling it, and I love telling stories. And so you change your voice, like all of a sudden I realized, okay, I'm talking to you moms, but I'm talking to you like I'm talking to children, and I was saying, so what did they find, but I love that. But it was mostly because there were a couple little kids' faces I could see, and they were engaged, so then I turn into storytelling mode, right? And there's something magical about that, and it's just fun to hear a voice that is involved and engaged in the story, and rather than just this monotone, reading of the story. So don't be afraid to play with it and have fun doing it. And at first, maybe if there are some of you who haven't done that yet and are a little bit nervous about that, talk about that, because we can help you. We can help you get get brave enough to try it. Lindsay, you were going to say something else.
I just was going to add, yes, do the voices, even if they're weird, and it makes you laugh. That's even better. Always do the voices. Sometimes my kids will even be like, Mom, stop.
I know.
Stop it.
I know.
It's even better.
I consider that a win.
Yes, when they're totally embarrassed and they don't even have anybody around. They're just cannot believe their mom is doing this right now. Yeah. It's the best.
Voices, really bad accents, all of it. It's all good. Costumes, you can invite them to retell a story that you've told and act it out. I mean, there's just so much good comes from storytelling. And I can't even tell you the number of times that my kids wanted to have dad come back in, because at nighttime dad would go in and make up stories. And dads can be, not all of them probably, different personalities, but dads can be so good at going in and making up a story, the goofiest stories. And my kids still remember some of those stories that dad told, and they'll talk about these stories, and he just laughs because he can't remember it all. He was just trying to help them get off to sleep, so that we'd have some time in the evening or something, or just enjoying their responses to his stories. And he was just having fun in there. But that's what it's all about, is you having fun doing it. If you're bored and you're hating it, that's going to come through. So somehow, if you're not quite there yet, you need to help teach yourself how to appreciate it, how to love it, so that it can become a tool in your tool belt, something that you can use effectively. And I'm watching and hearing about moms all over the place that are now using well-educated heart principles, this pattern of learning. They're using it in their jobs and in their callings and in all different parts of their life, because it's so effective. Yes, Seven, even if that just helps the mom, there's merit to it. You are correct. Good point. Mary.
We studied the Restoring the Art of Storytelling, I think is what it's called, in another MOI group last year. And I really struggled with finding times when I felt like I could tell stories. Obviously you can tell stories before bed, but it's I don't know, that's kind of when we've always read books and things like that. But I discovered my favorite place to tell stories is the car, because my 5-year-old is obsessed with knock knock jokes, and
there we go.
Yep, he wants to share knock knock jokes all the time in the car. And I know 2 knock knock jokes, and he knows one knock knock joke, and one of them is the one that I know. And so it just kind of turns into this mindless, I'm just gonna say nonsense words and we're all gonna laugh at it, and it drives me nuts. And I was, at the time he was in speech 30 minutes away, and I had to take him twice a week, and so we were in the car a lot. And one day he asked me if we could play knock knock jokes, and I just said, would you like to hear a story? He said, yeah. And I told him the story of the little engine that could, because I could remember that one. And he loved it. And then he asked, he just was quiet. He's never quiet. He just stopped talking, and he just sat there. I had to, and he's like, yeah. And I was like, okay.
So you had some great motivation to come up with a nice long story to fill up the drive time.
For him again, and then it makes my car time knock knock joke free, and Or I Spy free. I Spy and knock knock jokes, man. Those are the car things that I just can handle for about 5 seconds. And anyway, so if you're looking for a place to tell stories,
Driving in the car.
car is amazing.
Nice, nice. I love it. Also, I used lunchtime because they had food in their mouths, so that worked too. But I love that. Thanks for the recommendation, Mary. Emily, it's good to have you here. We're talking about storytelling, and I love it. Any other thoughts? Any other moms want to share experiences of storytelling or fears about it, hesitancy about it? If you want to talk about that too, that is fine. Or how can you help a mom who is afraid of it, who's feeling hesitant, who feels like, oh, I can't do that. Have you met someone like that? I have. Have you met moms? Oh, Melanie. Okay, finally, we're getting there. All right, confession time. Melanie has a hard time with storytelling. All right, Melanie, tell your story. I mean, why do you have a hard time? Why do you think you have a hard time with storytelling? Or what are you afraid of? Or what do you want to share?
Well, I think in general, I think I just have a hard time coming up with ideas. And when I went through the Catch the Vision course, everything that Marlene said about imagination, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to write that down. I had like stopped it and re-listened and stopped it and re-listened and typed it out because it's totally me. I'm the one with the lack of imagination that like everything that she listed as the consequences of lack of imagination. That's what I struggle with. And it's interesting because I've struggled with those things for so long, but I never would have connected it with lack of imagination. So that was very enlightening to recognize that. But I feel like I have a long way to go.
No, that's really interesting though. Really interesting. I remember early on in my relationship with my husband, we would be talking, driving somewhere or working on something, but have some time together. And I'm trying to remember if it was we were dating or we were married, and I don't remember, but it was early on. And he would start kind of dreaming, and he would dream really big about what if we got a house like this on this kind of property. We had room, and we could, we had lots of grass. We could have like a baseball diamond because we both love baseball. We'd have a baseball diamond, just grass as far as the eye could see. We could even paint on the walls, how many feet, in the different corners. And wouldn't that be, he would just be talking about these things. And I would always be practical. I thought I was helping by bringing up all the practical points, why that wasn't very smart, or it wasn't going to happen, or maybe we could plan for it this far out, or whatever, and I was so incredibly helpful. And then after a while, after several times of that, he said, I appreciate, he's always so nice. I appreciate the things that you have to share, about that. But, sometimes even if it's never, ever, ever going to be possible, I just like to dream about things. I just like to imagine what would it be like if, and I kind of went, oh man, I am shooting down his dreams. Like every time he brings up something, I'm shooting it down. And so then I started, but I really had to like push out my box, because I wasn't coming out of the box yet. I was still like safely in my box, but at least I made it bigger and I allowed for some imagining. And so Melanie, I understand. But then I loved stories. And so I would read stories and have a completely different life because I would imagine myself, in the story, or at least imagine the story happening. So for me, the path was me reading. Then that helped me to become more comfortable with the sharing. So I don't know if that, if that would be helpful, but it's tough when it doesn't come naturally to you and you hear people talking about it all around you, it's like, oh, because me making up a story, nah, I don't trust that in me. My box isn't big enough for that yet, but I can learn a story and then share that story. And so that I can do. And because I've learned, I don't have to tell it word for word. I don't even have to get it right. I can forget stuff and make up my own stuff in the middle. But I can start with a story I know, kind of like what Mary did in the car ride, telling the little engine that could, right? And if you would have had one of the storybooks there and checked her on every word and every phrase, she probably, didn't have every single one of them per the book, but she told the story and had that experience with her kids. And there's so much value in that. I just love that. Okay, I'm going to read what Emily wrote. We do a choose your adventure story. I begin, then ask them questions like, what is the witch's name? Oh, I love that. What color is her dress? Does she fly on a broom? How many times does she try to catch the prince? What is the prince's name? Does whoever in the story have a sister? And then they fill in the details. Mary, this is a good idea for you for the long car rides because she says it fills lots of time. So I love that. I never thought of that. Emily, that's such a good idea. Such a fun idea. Yeah.
Similar where if my daughters asked me to tell a story, I'd start it for a few sentences and then trade it off to them. And sometimes they go off for another 5 or 10 minutes, and then either they finish the story or maybe I'd get another turn. But it's kind of like a small way for me to start, I guess, just adding little bits to their story because they're so creative. That was kind of fun to not feel the pressure of having to think up the whole thing myself.
Right. No, that's good. And that's brave. So good for you. I think that's so great. And then you are helping them to gain this trait that, that you maybe feel you're a little weak on, but you're going to help give that to them. And then you'll grow in the process. I love that. I love that moms are forever giving gifts to their children without even really realizing it. I love that. It's just so sweet. Okay, moms, I've made it all the way to 11 talking. Oh. Cadence, let's see what Cadence said. Oh, I love it. Cadence, can you read it? I want you to read it. I want to hear your voice.
All right, so my husband will make up stories with my son at night to get him to settle down. Say, once upon a time, there was a big, and then the kid fills it. York will fill it in. And get off my phone, what are you doing?
I'm just making heads to what I want to do.
Okay. Anyways, so they'll make up the story, and then what do you do? And then and their favorite is Tootie the turtle because the turtle toots all the time. And I'm like, well, this is very this is a boy's story. There you go. So that's what they do. But it's really fun and they both really like it. My husband has a great imagination, so he's really good at that.
I love that. I think that's really cute and really creative. So much fun. Yeah. Bathroom humor sadly always works. But hey, you can start with that and then build up to something more heartwarming. Don't tell Marlene I said that. Okay. 7 said that has been working fantastically for our kids too. Thanks for sharing that, Emily. Oh, yes. Okay, so that was the Choose An Adventure story. I love that. Now Emily's going to talk to us for just a sec about family stories. So it did come up. 7 brought it up earlier, Emily, in a comment, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about that with older kids.
So I just have found great value in sharing with my kids some of our family stories, things that Grandpa did, things that that my husband and I did as kids when we were at college and stuff. My kids, my middle kids are headed into that stage of college, and so I think it's been good to share with them. And then I had an experience where I learned a family story from someone who was a complete stranger to me. I was 3 or 4 states away and they said, wait, you're a ball I grew up in. And he started telling me this story about this experience he had working for one of my second cousins. And in farming, the weather's a big deal. And so he talked about how this cousin had been such an example to him about prayer and about the power of the priesthood that he had as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it was an amazing story that I never would have heard any other place. And we've shared it now with my kids, and my boys especially have taken great comfort in that, in understanding some of those tender mercies and miracles we have in our life. And as we tell them and retell them, that experience is strengthened in our memory, and we can draw upon that in times when we need that remembrance that our Heavenly Father knows us and loves us and cares about us, and we can call on Him in times when we struggle. And so I found, especially as my kids are getting older, that having those family stories in their memory bank has been very beneficial as they leave home.
I love it. I love that. We have a collection of stories, and ours are nothing fancy. They haven't been printed on a fancy book. They're just typed up and in a binder. But we would use those for family home evening lessons or something, have everyone pick a story and then share that story. And my kids know those stories, and they go on Family History to look and see if any extended family member has shared new stories that they didn't know before. Madeline, Laura's daughter that I work with, Madeline knows and loves stories of her family, and she's forever sharing them. And I love that. I love how important that is to her. Oh, and Amber, I love that we're hearing from Amber. My mom has stayed with my kids when my husband and I have gone out of town. My kids would ask her to tell them a story from when she was a little girl. They loved it so much that she typed some of them up, and they love to read them and ask her to add new ones. I love that. What a gift from Grandma to your children. That is so, so sweet. I think we forget, about the power of stories. That would be a thing to start kind of being aware of right now. What are the stories that are happening in your family right now? The little miracles, or just the sweet or the funny stories. Type those up, record those somewhere so that your children will have those when they get older. Ask them to add to them. I'm always amazed at the stories that I'm hearing about when my kids get together and they're sharing about things that happened when they were little. And I'm always thinking, I thought I was always around. Where was I when that happened? I never knew about that. It's just so much fun. I think Linnell, I'm sure, would have some things to add about that. I know Linnell's so good about keeping a journal and blogging about their family and their experiences. So I think it's just so perfect that we're going to turn this time over to Linnell so she can provide us with a summary, some of her thoughts as we say goodbye for today.
Oh, Emily, I was just going to talk about remember. Yeah. So Emily wrote, oh, Remember by Elder Eyring talks about family stories and recording them. And something that Emily shared while she was talking is how sharing these stories helps us remember. And it's making me realize that I have many years of life stories, personal life stories that I could be sharing with my children, of times that I have overcome something or learned something. A very simple story that I've told my children is that I used to hate watermelon. I didn't eat it ever, but my grandma loves watermelon. And anytime she would come visit, she would always buy watermelon. And I was the only one who couldn't eat watermelon. I was the one who always missed out on enjoying it. It looked so delicious. But every time I tried it, every time she came, I would try it to see if maybe my taste buds had changed. And one day I started liking it. And now I love watermelon. Just like that. I just kept trying it. And so I always tell my children this story whenever we have a food on the table that they don't like. And even if they know they don't like it, I remind them the watermelon story. And they all know Mama didn't like watermelon. She tried it, and now she does. And so I think about the times that I've shared stories with my children and how it's helped them. And it makes me want to really capture and remember and recall and share those stories of my own life, because they're so meaningful. And I think they give our children roots. And it allows them to connect more deeply so that when they are gone, they know who they are, they know where they've come from, and they feel a part of something bigger than themselves. Lori did mention my blog, which I've been using for several years. I've been blogging for a while, and I'm kind of in a weird spot where I don't know exactly what to write about anymore. I used to write everything and do all the milestones, all the events, all of the everything. Like, it's so easy to capture memories and details and stories, but at the same time, it can become really overwhelming, because once you want to capture everything, then you just don't have time for it. And so now I'm at the point where I have to decide, what exactly do I want to capture, and what is it that I want to share with my children? I think this exercise will help me to know what kind of stories to share and what things really do impact me and my children so that I know what's worth sharing. But that's just some of my own figuring out that I need to do. And for our discussion, to wrap up our discussion about storytelling, I have just a little quote from Catch the Vision, this first one. And it's page 196, the section about storytelling. And it says, it is a law of life that the only thing which we may always keep is the thing we give. If then the prime function of storytelling is the giving of joy, then joy is the thing which the storyteller may have. So that is what we get to have as we practice storytelling. As we share our stories with our children, we get to have joy because we're sharing joy with them.
That is beautiful. I remember that and love that. So what a great, great gift we receive, to receive joy when we open up and share and tell those stories. Thank you, Linnell. Thanks everybody for being here. Thank you for sharing. Thanks for being so amazing. And we will see you all again next Friday. Oh, yes. I love that, Amber. I've been thinking about that. I think that idea of story worth, oh, it's so, so good to help our older, all of it, any of us, but Storyworth sends weekly prompts with questions that helps people tell their life story. And then they get the books published at the end of the year. Lindsey Bunting did that for her mother-in-law too. And it's been amazing, she says. I love that. Thanks for sharing that idea too, Amber. Really, we're looking forward to seeing you next week. That'll be really fun to get to see you in person, but we sure appreciate your input. Thanks, everybody.